Well, thank you very much for that unexpected introduction. It's super surreal to be sandwiched between Bruce and Woz like this. Like, I just finished reading Cryptonomicon, and one of Bruce's algorithms, Solitaire, is in that book, so I'm a little bit like starstruck right now. And I mean, Woz is Woz, so that's just crazy. But anyway, I'm Ed Horn. I'm a software product manager at Automated Logic, which is Carrier's business unit responsible for the design and manufacture of building automation hardware and software. And I've spent my entire career in building automation, and the last 14 years of that career in the Automated Logic family. My current role as a product manager is actually kind of a new development. I'm actually here today in the capacity of my former role, as you see on the slide there, as the engineering manager for North America for our field operations group. And today I'm going to be sharing our experience in choosing a partner to provide Credential Vault storage solution for our business. So Automated Logic Field Operations is the arm of Carrier that uses Automated Logic building automation products to design and install buildings for our customers. So before I launch into a talk about the credential management needs of a specific business, it's probably appropriate to give you some context on what that business actually does. Building automation systems essentially make modern buildings, their goal is to make modern buildings comfortable, safe, and efficient, and to reduce the operating costs of those buildings for their owners. And generally speaking, they accomplish this by using sensors around the building to determine the current state of systems and of occupants, and to send signals to electromechanical equipment to really control the systems or to affect the systems that they control. And most often, these systems are responsible for really controlling two parameters, and that's occupant comfort and energy efficiency. Now, architecturally, our building automation systems consist of a central server running our flagship product, which is called Web Control. And Web Control is really just responsible for user interface to the system, historical data storage and maintenance, but all of the business control, the actual control of systems within the building is handled out at the edge, and it's in the lower right of the slide here, in what we call our controllers. And all of these controllers are networked together and networked back to the server, and the user interface is networked to the server through networks that are very often out of our control. We see an IP network there, and there are almost always serial networks in the building as well, usually more than one. And all of this sits in customer infrastructure. So many of the businesses you've heard from are hosted businesses, right? Their product is hosted, they provide it as a service. Even Bitwarden, though they have a self-hosted option, primarily provides as a service. We really don't have that model. It's not how our industry is built. So that need to operate on customer networks and on customer infrastructure really brings us to the crux of the problem. So our customers grant us this access in whatever way is right for them, and it manifests in a kaleidoscope of ways. So we have to access VPNs and VDEs of all stripes. We have to keep track of shared and individual and service accounts, credentials, and all of that may be required to change regularly, right? Password rotation, et cetera. And we also have to keep track of individual credentials associated with our application server and the databases that it uses, et cetera. So our field offices, we go to market through field offices that are either wholly owned, well, in our case, are wholly owned. And their employees have done a really great job, or done their best job to manage this complexity, but it really left us in a suboptimal state. There wasn't any consistency in the way that these credentials were tracked. Credentials were generated that were either predictable or, God forbid, though common, outright reused. And I think most people on this call can immediately recognize that that state of affairs carries with it a very specific and worrisome set of risks. So as a service business, our ability to quickly gain access to customer systems and be able to affect fixes or updates or whatever is critical to our success as a business. And having credentials in the hands of individuals, so they only have access, or having credentials that are poorly managed and inaccessible, that's enough to keep us up at night. So in an effort to ensure that access was reliable, that these credentials were often created to be predictable, again, either by pattern or by reuse. And it meant, most importantly, that people who had knowledge, legitimate business knowledge of these credentials, would continue to have knowledge of credentials for new customer sites and new installations, regardless of whether or not the legitimate business need had elapsed. And that is not a great situation. So we realized pretty quickly as a leadership team that we needed a solution, and the solution we identified is a password vault solution, right? I would assume that most people on this call are users of Bitwarden, which is itself a password vault solution. And we, like any good business team, put together our list of requirements, right? On this list, just to pick out a few that were particularly important, our technicians who primarily use these credentials, they're road warriors. They need access quickly on really any device, but particularly on laptop and mobile. Mobile being especially important because they're very frequently, they've run out of battery on one device and have to pull another. It's critical. Additionally, we're a Okta house for single sign-on. So our workflow about onboarding and offboarding users from various systems primarily relies on Okta. I wanted to make sure that support was there. And finally, credential autofill in browsers was important because our product its primary user interface is in browsers, and we use Chrome and Edge as enterprises. So with those kind of criteria in hand, we moved forward on partner identification. Now, the first step here is what anyone would do. We went and found the leaders in the industry. And for us, leaders didn't just mean the people with the best technology, but really the people who could support an enterprise of our scale. Carrier is a very large enterprise. We wanted to make sure that they had global reach, et cetera. So there were some specific criteria around that. The next thing we did is maybe a little bit novel, and I would venture to guess it's getting less novel as younger and younger people come into the workforce. But rather than engaging in the standard B2B, business to business kind of sales cycle, we hopped onto the socials, right? And we hopped onto support forums. And we weren't just looking for somebody's, owned Twitter account that they control through their communications department. We were looking for places where members of the community, users of those products, go to find help when they have a problem, when they don't understand how something works. So support forums and Reddit was a good one. Places where people are discussing trouble they're having. That gave us a ton of insight to move to the next phase, actually eliminate a few people who had some pretty weird cultural things going on in their user base, or where we had seen some disturbing trends, and moved on with 3 potential partners. Now, from there, we contacted each through kind of the standard B2B method, fill out the online form, get a call from the salesperson, and verified the qualifications of these potential partners. We found one of them they didn't have SSO. So we proceeded with 2, one of whom I'm talking to you today, so you might imagine was Bitwarden. We arranged pilots with these 2 potential partners. And the pilot really comes down to 4 critical components. You've got people, communication, deployment, so actually running the pilot, and then how you engage with your partners or potential partners during this time. As anyone who has read a book on change management since, say, the late 90s knows, the people are really key, right, in deploying any change to your enterprise. And so we found that there were a few kind of key considerations that really had to be taken into account. The first is to use the actual user base. So when you're running a pilot, don't have your IT people and executives be the only users in the pilot. Bring them in if they want to be brought in, but listen to the people who are actually going to use the product. Next, among that group, find, I'd say, like 3 key constituencies. One is the influencers. These are the people that others trust. That's a given, right? Next, don't avoid the skeptics and the opponents to change. That's critical. These people often have the best feedback and the least amount of filter. So if you can just be patient and listen, they often have some really, really good feedback. The final constituency that we found was really helpful for our use cases. As I mentioned, this wasn't a novel problem. We had people who had already tried to solve this problem. And so we made sure to bring them in so they could compare the weaknesses and strengths of their solutions with the ones we were proposing. As far as the size and breadth of your pilot program, make sure you're bringing in people a number of people that is manageable to the group that's managing the pilot. In this case, it was primarily me, so 25 people was about all that I could touch. And I wanted to make sure that people got my individual attention. And we had to make sure in our case that it was we have to make sure it's a good cross section of the population. And in our case, that meant geographic diversity, since my responsibility was across North America. For communication, I'm going to start at the bottom actually. Setting up a cadence was really important for us. So we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to touch these users on a regular basis. We chose weekly for a very short period of time each week so that it wasn't a big burden. So we chose 30 minutes. And in our initial communication, we made sure to explain why we were even doing this, kind of what the problems we saw were so people could relate to that. And we really wanted to explain two things. First, let's not just tell people their passwords are insecure, but let's tell them what a secure password looks like. And second, let's head the question of, aren't I putting all my eggs in one basket with a password manager, off at the pass, and talk about why we felt that a credential vault was the right solution and with the right operational security would be a secure solution. By the way, Bitwarden has some great resources that we actually just used linked directly to at bitwarden.com/help and blog. Deployment. So number one thing about deployment is deploy realistically. It's no good to anyone to have an academic exercise about what the world might be like if we used a password manager. A credential vault needs to be used, and it needs to be used under real circumstances for a user to really get a feel for what this is and does. So we actually I personally imported thousands of existing passwords from Post-it notes, Excel spreadsheets, other solutions into Bitwarden and into the other partner during the pilot, and actually had our users use that for a period of our specific window, 2 months. The final thing that is interesting and is maybe food for thought for those on the call is that there would be a legitimate use case or a legitimate case to be made to run your pilots in parallel. In other words, have 2 different people responsible for the pilots and 2 different pilot groups. We didn't choose to do that primarily due to resource constraints, but we also found a little bit of benefit in the compare and contrast that happened when users were able to experience both partners' products. And finally, the partners. I think this is often, I've observed this often being overlooked, where we get an IT department engaged and they go out and deploy a solution and they set KPIs and interview their users, but that they forget that at the end of the day, this is a transaction taking place between 2 businesses that isn't just going to go away. This isn't going to be a one and done transaction. So we wanted to make sure that we were selecting a partner that could really support us in the long term and really came in with the attitude and the culture and the engagement that we needed to be supported long term. So to do that, we made sure, and the Bitwarden team can attest to this, to really ask them for help, really lean on them to deploy in this pilot and really give feedback, honest feedback about what we liked and didn't like about the product, and to really listen to how they responded to that. And finally, we asked a lot of technical questions of our partners and saw who they brought to the table. So we weren't terribly interested in just getting the responses that a salesperson would give us. They're always going to be sunny. We wanted to hear what the technical people had to say, what the business leaders had to say. And so we asked hard enough questions that those people had to get involved. So in summary, it really all comes down to a few things. It's user preference, that's obvious. It's admin and management preference, so how well does it fit with your business? And certainly the thing everybody thinks about is the technology right? Does it fit? But truly, at the end of the day, our selection came down to partnership. And it was really about selecting a business partner to move us forward in our quest for better security. So I want to thank everybody very much at Bitwarden for letting me have the time to talk today. And I hope that some of you got something out of our experiences with selecting a solution and a partner. Have a great day.